It's a big one. I'm talking about the biggest mistake you may be making to get sales from your podcast and an opportunity to sit down with me totally free. Listen in. Welcome to Uncommonly More with Stacey Harris. I am Stacey. I'm the host of this show and the CEO of podcast production agency Uncommonly More. My team and I work with podcasters just like you to shift shows from frustrating time sucks to productive members of sales teams with professional, strategic podcast production. You know what? I think that's enough. Let's get into the show and we'll talk more there. Welcome. I want to dig in today just quick and dirty style because I'm sharing really just a theme from some chats I had in September when I opened up to my email list some pre-production strategy calls totally free. These were 30-minute calls where we dug into what they were going to be selling in Q4, what was happening with their podcast now, and I gave them some tips and some suggestions on ways they can make their show better. The cool thing is I'm doing this again this month. My calendar was opened last week for our existing clients, our production clients. And now this week I am opening a limited number of these totally free pre-production strategy calls. These are 30-minute calls. You're going to send me a link to an episode. I'm going to listen to the show. And then you and I will sit down and we'll talk through some tweaks, some changes, some suggestions. And one of those will very likely be what we're talking about today, because this came up on pretty much every single call. So if you want to get your hands on one of these production calls, head to the link in the show notes, click a time, check the calendar. If the calendar is still open, there is still time available. If the calendar is not open, the spots have been filled and you should listen to the episodes earlier when they come out or get on the email list. Head over to uncommonlymore.com/newsroom, get access to the private podcast, the podcast newsroom, and find out very, very first when I open up these spots. Because here's the deal. Podcast newsroom folks found out about this November 1st. So if you would like to know these things bright and early as well, make sure you are subscribed to the podcast newsroom. All right. Once more, uncommonlymore.com/newsroom. And there is a link in the show notes. So just go right to your little player feed, open the description, click a link. If that link is still opening a calendar, you're good. If the spots are filled, though, the spots are filled. And you'll have to wait to see if I offer this again. Or if you desperately want to get one, we'll redirect that when they're full to our 1-hour strategy session calls. Does that sound fair? I think that sounds fair. All right. So grab your spot if you would like to sit down with me, and let's hop in, because when I did these calls, there was a couple of things that came up, not infrequently. They were pretty common, but there was one thing that came up on every single call, all of them. And that was be more clear about what's next. In so many podcast episodes, I'm hearing these sort of throwaway calls to action. These quick 30-second promos, and imagine heavy air quotes around that, shoved at the end of an episode when likely very little of your audience remains anyway. And let's be honest, the ones that are still there want to know what's next. So giving them and if you think it could be helpful, then yeah, just go over to my website. And that's it. That's the whole promo. That is not enough. You've got to be really clear on what's next. Because if you're not, they're going to miss it. And this is where we end up creating these sort of value pits that are a massive disservice to our listeners. And I want to say that again, because I want this to really sink in. When you create these value pits, when you create these endless pools of information, you are doing a huge, ginormous, catastrophic disservice to your listener. Because we know as experts that our clients are all universally really good, really good at sitting in a learning phase or a discovery phase and not shifting into action. It's really easy to do. We're guilty of it. I'm guilty of it. And when we create these sort of pits of value where it's just information being fire hosed at them, it's impossible to dig out of that and move into action because we don't yet know what the action is, because we're swimming in the ability to pretend we're doing something by learning about it. That's not helpful. And so you have to disrupt that pattern. You have to interrupt the flow of information with an action. And that action is what they're supposed to do next. Signing up for a pre-production call with me, that promo I did before we got into this, that's what I want to hear from you. A solid call to action. Here's where you go. Here's what's next. It really is that simple. And so what I want you to be looking at is how can you be pulling these calls to action in a way that is more obvious and is more valuable for your listener. That may be doing a promo at the beginning of your episode. That may be having a knocked out mid-roll sponsor spot that is just about your offering. That may be a more solid promo at the outro. It may be integrating your promo into your content. You know, like I did a few minutes ago when I referenced the call to action that I had at the beginning of the episode, which will also be talked about at the end of this episode. Yeah. As I'm sure you've caught on, this episode is one big call to action. It's a wildly valuable call to action because it's showing you what you need to be doing. It is modeling the behavior change that I suggest. But it's all about, hey, here's the results of booking these conversations with me. What's hilarious is I've gone through and listened to episodes that have come out since I had these production calls with these clients, and guess what? They all have much stronger calls to action now. They have a clear next step for their listener. They have an action their listeners can take, and I cannot wait to check in with them after the first of the year and see what changed for them in this corner in doing that, in creating that really clear and actionable next step. And that's what I want you to be looking at. As you move through these next 2 months, as you close out 2021, I want you to commit to having a strong call to action in every single episode. And for advanced bonus points, I want you to have 2. Now, point of clarification, these 2 can be the same. These 2 can be different. It just depends. I have seen this be really valuable both ways. Let's use this episode as an example. One of the things I could do is we had the call to action at the top of the episode for these free pre-production calls, which kind of paired with a call to action to join the email list, because that's how you get access to the first call to action sooner. So we had 2 calls to action in one promo, but they make sense together in the context of what's happening. Another example of this could be having a promo at the top of the episode for a free opt-in and a promo at the end of the episode that is an investment. So we have some clients who do this really well. An example of this is Tara Newman over at the Bold Leadership Revolution. For her show, we will often put in a promo for her revenue goal calculator, which is awesome, by the way, at the top. And then the content itself helps sell really position her program, and then she'll have a call to action that is, if this resonated, here's how to join the Bold Profit Academy. Here's how to take your next step. And so she's really tying these conversations in together, and I'll link in the show notes an example of one of those episodes where she does that really well. There's got to be moments in your show where you tell them what's next, because if you don't tell them what's next, they're never going to move out of this data collection, this learning chapter, and into the action. So look at how can you be moving them into action multiple points in the episode. All right. I told you this one was going to be quick and dirty. This was, again, the thing that came up on every single one of these pre-production calls. And so I knew I had to bring it to you this month because it's going to be a game changer for a lot of you. We will have a couple more of these episodes over the next couple of months where we're recapping things that came up on these pre-production calls because I think it's really helpful. So if you want to volunteer to be one of these pre-production strategy calls, remember to go to the link in the show notes. Again, if those spots are filled, make sure you're on the email list for the next time I open them up. And of course, if you are ready and I don't want to screw around with a pre-production call, I just want to be making big changes on my show, we have 3 spots left to work with us this year. If you want to start 2022 strong with your podcast, maybe so in love with your podcast again, which is a side effect of hiring us, by the way, make sure you head over to uncommonlymore.com/podcast production to learn more about that. All right? See all those next steps? Pick which one works for you and take it. All right. I'll see you next week. If you made it to this point of the show and you still happen to be listening, which statistically is unlikely, I want to say thank you for listening. Thanks for hanging out with me today, and I want to hear from you. So reach out on social or via email and let me know what actions you're going to take from today's episode, because honestly, that's why we produce this show. That's why I record this show. That's why my team does all the work to release this show, is so that we can help you. We can help make a difference in your show and consequently in your business. If you haven't left a review for the show, head over to ratethispod.com/more. It's an easy way to show some love to the show and also help us reach more podcasters who are looking for the same kind of support you were looking for. If you have any suggestions or ideas or thoughts you would like me to address on the show, be sure to reach out. Again, like I say a lot, this is the start of the conversation, and I can't wait to hear what you have to say.